I couldn't believe what was happening. The betrayal burned through me like acid, but I refused to let her manipulation become my destruction. My name is Fred Huntington, and I'm 35 years old. Each morning, I wake in my workshop-adjacent apartment surrounded by the scent of cedar and precision tools that never lie. My wife, Haley Huntington, technically still my wife on paper, thought I wouldn't notice when she slipped away from our honeymoon dinner to meet Marco the bartender in that dimly lit service corridor. My friend Jasper had warned me about her constant need for attention, but I'd dismissed his concerns with blind trust. I watched her face transform from desire to shock when I stepped from the shadows, my hands steady while my stomach knotted. This wasn't an accident or misunderstanding. It was calculated betrayal. I chose justice over vengeance. For anyone who's been betrayed, remember this: dignity outlasts rage. Before I go any further, let me know in the comments where in the world you are watching from, and make sure to subscribe because tomorrow I will share a story you don't want to miss. But let me start from the beginning. The plane touched down in Naples mid-morning. I remember thinking the sky looked almost artificially blue, like someone had turned up the saturation on the world. After collecting our bags and finding our driver, we wound along coastal roads that hugged cliffs dropping hundreds of feet to the Mediterranean below. "Fred, look!" Haley pressed her face against the window as our driver navigated hairpin turns. "It's exactly like the pictures." I squeezed her hand, feeling the smooth metal of her wedding band against my palm. "Worth the wait, right?" She beamed at me, eyes bright with excitement. "Absolutely worth it." The Amalfi Coast stretched before us like a postcard come to life. White buildings cascading down cliffs, lemon groves dotting hillsides, and that endless blue water. I'd saved for 3 years to make this happen, putting aside profits from my custom cabinetry business month after month. "You worked so hard for this," Haley said, as if reading my thoughts. She leaned against my shoulder. My hard-working husband. The word husband still felt new in my ears. We'd been married just 4 days ago, and sometimes I'd catch myself thinking of her as my girlfriend, not my wife. Old habits die hard, I guess. Our hotel perched on a cliff overlooking Positano. The lobby gleamed with marble floors and local ceramics, and the receptionist greeted us with complimentary Prosecco. "To celebrate the honeymooners," she said, raising her own small glass in toast. Haley immediately pulled out her phone. "We need a picture of this moment." She positioned us by the balcony with our glasses, the sprawling coastline behind us. "Perfect for Instagram. Hashtag forever starts now." I remembered the early days of my business when I'd work 16-hour days in a rented garage space, building custom pieces and sleeping on a cot between projects. This trip felt like validation for all those years of struggle. "Let's get settled and explore," I suggested after we'd finished our drinks. Our suite was impressive. A king-sized bed, private terrace, and floor-to-ceiling windows that framed the Mediterranean like a living painting. I unpacked methodically while Haley flitted around the room, photographing details for her social feeds. "The lighting is absolutely perfect here," she declared, positioning herself by the window. "Can you take one of me looking out at the view? My followers are going to die." I obliged, snapping several photos as she posed, her blonde hair catching the sunlight. It struck me how comfortable she was in front of the camera, something I'd always found endearing about her confidence. We spent the afternoon wandering Positano's narrow streets, stopping for gelato and browsing shops filled with handmade sandals and ceramics. Haley bought a flowing white dress that matched the buildings perfectly for tomorrow's dinner. That evening, we dined at a cliffside restaurant the hotel had recommended. String lights hung overhead, and a violinist moved between tables playing traditional Italian songs. The waiter recommended local specialties, and we indulged in seafood pasta and wine from nearby vineyards. "I want to remember every detail," Haley said, filming a panoramic view of our table, the musicians, and finally settling on me. "Say something romantic, husband." I raised my glass awkwardly. "To my beautiful wife and our future together." She beamed, showing dimples that still made my heart skip. Perfect caption material. Throughout dinner, I noticed how easily Haley charmed everyone around us, chatting with the waiter in broken Italian phrases she'd memorized, complimenting the violinist, and even convincing the chef to come out for a photo. She glowed under attention like a flower turning toward sunlight. "The chef's giving us his personal recipe for limoncello," she announced, typing notes into her phone. "He says we have to try it with the lemon cake." When we returned to our room that night, slightly tipsy and full of good food, Haley disappeared into the bathroom to freshen up. I sat on the edge of the bed, still taking in the reality that this was my life now, married to a beautiful woman, successful enough to afford this trip, all my hard work finally paying off. Haley's phone lit up on the nightstand. Then again. I wasn't trying to look, but the foreign number caught my eye. A moment later, it lit up once more. When she returned, I nodded toward her phone. "Someone's trying to reach you." "Oh," she said, checking quickly. "Just restaurant confirmations. The concierge said they'd text instead of call since we're American." I nodded, though something felt off about her quick explanation. 3 notifications for restaurant confirmations at 11 p.m. We got ready for bed, and Haley fell asleep almost immediately, her breathing soft and rhythmic beside me. I lay awake longer, listening to the distant sound of waves against the cliffs. Our phones sat side by side on the nightstand, both screens occasionally illuminating the darkness with notifications. Mine showing business emails from back home, hers lighting up with messages I couldn't read. 2 devices glowing in the dark. One honest, one lying. I woke early the next morning, sunlight streaming through a gap in the curtains. Beside me, Haley was still fast asleep, her blonde hair spread across the pillow. She'd always been a late sleeper, something about beauty rest being non-negotiable. The clock read 7:15, perfect time to explore the streets before tourists flooded them. I dressed quietly and slipped out, leaving a note on my pillow. "Gone exploring. Back with coffee. F." The morning air was crisp with salt, and Positano was just waking up. Shopkeepers hosed down sidewalks, delivery trucks navigated narrow streets, and elderly locals gathered at corner cafes. This was the real Italy, not the glossy version we'd seen yesterday. I stopped to watch a carpenter repairing shutters on a storefront, admiring his technique. The craftsmanship reminded me of my first job, apprenticing for Old Man Weber back in Ohio. He'd taught me to feel the grain of wood, to understand its story before cutting. Standing there in the Italian morning light, I felt a strange pang of homesickness for my workshop. After walking for nearly an hour, I found a cafe tucked into a side street. The barista nodded in approval when I ordered in broken Italian, "Du caffè per favore," and wrapped fresh pastries in wax paper for me to take back. By the time I returned to our room, it was almost 9. Haley was awake, propped against pillows, smiling into her phone. "Morning, sunshine," I said, setting the coffee and pastries on the nightstand. "Sleep well?" She looked up, momentarily startled, then quickly locked her screen. "Hey, I was just about to text you." She stretched and accepted the coffee I offered. "You're such a sweetheart. How long have you been up?" "Couple hours. Wanted to see the town before it got crowded." Haley sipped her coffee and moaned in appreciation. "This is incredible. You found the good stuff." "Only the best for Mrs. Huntington," I said, sitting beside her on the bed. The name still felt new in my mouth. Strange, but right. We ate pastries while Haley scrolled through the day's options on her phone. "So I booked myself a spa appointment for this afternoon," she announced. "They had a cancellation and I grabbed it. You don't mind, do you? I know you wanted to check out that woodworking shop we passed yesterday." "Not at all. Sounds perfect, actually." She showered and dressed in a hurry, claiming she wanted to get some sun before her appointment. I spent the morning answering a few work emails, then headed to the woodworking shop I'd spotted yesterday. When I returned to our room around 1 o'clock, Haley was gone, presumably at her spa appointment. Her things were scattered across the dresser: sunglasses, lipstick, room key. Her phone lay face down beside them. I moved to tidy up a bit and picked up her phone to move it to the nightstand. As I lifted it, the screen lit up with a notification. "Can you slip away? M." My hand froze. The message hovered there for 3 seconds before disappearing. Something cold and heavy settled in my stomach. M? Who the hell was M? I set the phone down exactly as I'd found it, my mind racing. It could be innocent. A spa masseuse confirming her appointment. A restaurant manager we'd met. but slip away didn't sound like business correspondence. I sat on the edge of the bed, pulse pounding in my ears. 6 days ago, we'd exchanged vows. Now this. When Haley returned later, cheeks flushed and hair slightly damp, I pretended everything was normal. "How was the spa?" I asked, keeping my voice casual. "Amazing," she gushed. "I feel like a new woman. How was your day?" We dressed for dinner that evening, a reservation at the hotel's rooftop restaurant. I wore the navy linen shirt Haley had picked out for me. She chose a white sundress that made her tan glow golden in the sunset light. The rooftop bar was stunning, string lights suspended above tables, the darkening Mediterranean stretching to the horizon. But I barely noticed the view. My attention was fixed on the bartender, a tall Italian man with olive skin and carefully styled dark hair. His name tag read, Marco, M. I watched as we approached the bar for pre-dinner drinks. The recognition in Marco's eyes was subtle but unmistakable when he saw Haley. She ordered in Italian, pronouncing each word with exaggerated care. He leaned closer than necessary, his smile intimate. "The lady knows her Italian wines," he commented, sliding her glass across the bar. Their fingers brushed, not accidentally. "Just practicing what I've learned," Haley replied, holding his gaze a beat too long. My chest tightened. The familiarity between them wasn't that of strangers. It was the easy chemistry of people who'd already broken the ice, who shared something private. Throughout dinner, Marco appeared at our table more often than required, topping off Haley's wine, suggesting desserts. Each time Haley would touch her hair, laugh a little too enthusiastically at his jokes. After our meal, Haley excused herself. "I'm going to freshen up before dessert," she said, dropping her napkin beside her plate. I waited 30 seconds, then followed, keeping a careful distance. Instead of turning toward the restrooms, she descended a service stairwell behind the bar. I moved quietly, staying just far enough back to remain unseen. At the landing between floors, she stopped. Marco was already there, waiting. He stepped forward, his hand finding her waist with practiced ease. Haley laughed, a soft, intimate sound I'd thought was reserved for me. "I was wondering if you got my message," he murmured. I'd seen enough. My hands were steady even as something heavy and cold settled in my chest. I stepped from the shadows into the dim light of the service corridor. "Enjoying the honeymoon, Haley?" The effect was immediate. Haley jerked away from Marco's touch like she'd been burned, her face draining of color as she spun toward my voice. Marco straightened, his easy confidence faltering for just a moment before settling into a practiced smile. "Fred?" Haley breathed, her voice thin and high. It's not what it looks like." I kept my expression neutral, though my jaw felt wired shut. "Really?" "Because it looks exactly like my wife sneaking off with another man 3 days into our honeymoon." Marco stepped forward, hands raised in what was supposed to be a calming gesture. "Amico, we were just talking." "Then keep talking," I said, pulling my phone from my pocket and holding it up. "Names, times. Start with the champagne on night 1. Haley's eyes widened, then narrowed as she gathered herself. The shock was wearing off, replaced by something harder, more calculating. She squared her shoulders and tossed her hair back. "Fred, put that down. You're embarrassing yourself. Not as much as you're embarrassing our marriage." She shook her head quickly, taking a step toward me. "You've got this all wrong. I was just thanking him for helping with the bags earlier. That's all." "Helping?" I repeated. "With his hand on your waist?" "It wasn't like that," she said softly, switching tactics. Her voice went gentle, conciliatory. "You're jumping to conclusions." "Then explain the message," I said evenly. "Can you slip away?" Her eyes darted toward Marco, a momentary glance that confirmed everything. He misunderstood. I was joking with him earlier when we were at the bar. "You know how people flirt here? It's harmless." The cool control in her voice, the ease of the lie, hit harder than any admission would have. This was rehearsed. This was familiar to her. "Harmless would have ended upstairs," I said. "This is planned." She swallowed, changing tactics again. "Fred, please, let's not do this here. We've had too much wine. Let's just go back to the room, okay? We can talk there." Marco raised his palms and backed away, muttering something in Italian as he retreated up the stairs. Smart man. I didn't move. I'll pack when I get back to the room, I said quietly. You can stay here with your harmless flirting. Her voice cracked with perfect timing. You don't mean that. I do. I'm not ruining the rest of my life to protect your story. Haley's face hardened. You're overreacting. This is ridiculous. She stepped closer, reaching for my arm. It was nothing, Fred. A misunderstanding. Don't throw away what we have over something so stupid. I looked at her hand on my sleeve and felt nothing. No rage, no passion. Just a clarity that surprised me. I could have shouted, could have made a scene that would echo through the entire hotel. Instead, I simply stepped back, letting her hand fall away. You already threw it away, I said. I'm just acknowledging it. The trembling in her lower lip might have been genuine, or it might have been another performance. It didn't matter anymore. I turned and walked away, leaving her in the service corridor with her excuses and the lingering scent of Marco's cologne. My footsteps echoed in the empty stairwell as I climbed back toward the lobby. Halfway up, I passed a decorative mirror mounted on the wall, one of those ornate Italian things with gold leaf around the edges. The face that looked back at me was calm, almost expressionless, except for the eyes. They belonged to a man who now understood that his marriage had ended 3 days after it began. I didn't go back to our room right away. Couldn't. The thought of seeing Haley, of watching her lie again, made my stomach turn. Instead, I found myself on our private balcony, the one I'd been so proud to afford. Just yesterday, I'd stood here with my arm around her waist, both of us staring at the moonlight dancing across the water. Amazing how quickly paradise can turn hollow. The night air had cooled, but I barely noticed. My mind kept replaying everything. The message on her phone, the way she'd leaned into Marco, her practiced excuses. 3 days. We'd been married for 3 days. I gripped the railing until my knuckles went white. Part of me wanted to confront her again to demand the full truth this time. But what would that accomplish? More lies, more excuses, more manipulation. My wedding band caught the dim light. The weight of it felt wrong now, like it belonged to someone else. I twisted it off and held it in my palm. $7,000 of custom platinum with her promise etched inside. Forever and always, H. Funny how always lasted 72 hours. I don't know how long I sat there on that balcony, watching the lights of fishing boats drift along the coastline. At some point, I heard the door to our suite open and close. Haley had returned, but she didn't come looking for me. Somehow that said everything. The sky was beginning to lighten, pink gold streaks pushing back the darkness when I finally decided what to do. Not in anger, not in revenge, but with the same careful planning I'd applied to every major decision in my life. By 5:30 a.m., I was showered, dressed, and standing at the front desk. The night manager had gone, replaced by Signora Valli, a poised woman with silver-streaked hair pulled into a neat bun. She glanced up from her computer with a professional smile. Mr. Huntington, you are an early riser. How may I help you? I need to discuss some concerning charges, I said, keeping my voice low and controlled. And a staff matter. Her smile faded into something more attentive. Of course, perhaps we could speak in my office. The office was small but immaculate, with framed certificates on the walls and a view of the service entrance. Signora Valli gestured for me to sit. Now, what seems to be the problem? There are charges on my bill from the bar last night that I didn't authorize, I explained. My wife appears to have been entertaining separately. Something in my tone must have communicated the real issue. Signora Valli's expression shifted from professional concern to understanding. I see, she said carefully. And the staff matter? One of your bartenders, Marco. He's been involved with my wife in a way that violates what I assume are your hotel policies. Her eyes narrowed slightly. That would indeed be against our strict professional standards. Do you have any evidence of this? Text messages, and I personally witnessed them together last night in the service stairwell. Signora Valli's lips pressed into a thin line. Mr. Huntington, I apologize deeply for this situation. I will need to document your complaint officially. The hotel takes such matters very seriously. I'd appreciate that, I said. And I'll need copies of all charges made to our room or by my wife separately, for legal purposes. She nodded once, crisp and efficient. Of course, I will also preserve the security footage from the public areas. It is our policy to maintain records when guest complaints involve staff conduct. Thank you. Back in the room, Haley was still asleep, her blonde hair spread across the pillow like nothing had happened. I moved quietly, packing my essentials. I took out my phone and made 2 quick calls, one to my bank to secure my business accounts, and another to the airline to cancel her return ticket. Before leaving, I wrote a note on the hotel stationery and placed it on the marble nightstand where she couldn't miss it. The U.S. Embassy opens at 9. You can explain it there. No accusations, no dramatic goodbye, just the clear message that she was on her own now. I took one last look at her sleeping form, this woman I'd thought I knew, this stranger I'd married, then quietly closed the door behind me. In the lobby, I spotted Marco entering through the staff entrance, looking tired but otherwise untroubled. He hadn't seen me, didn't know that his actions would soon cost him his job, didn't realize that his secret rendezvous would have consequences far beyond a tourist's broken heart. The taxi to the airport arrived exactly on time. As we pulled away from the hotel, I didn't look back, not once. The morning sun was climbing higher now, illuminating the famous Amalfi Cliffs in brilliant gold. From the air, they'd look like something from a postcard, the perfect honeymoon destination. My flight boarded 40 minutes later. I settled into my seat by the window, my wedding ring tucked deep in my pocket rather than on my finger. As the plane climbed, I watched the coastline shrink below us, those magnificent cliffs growing smaller and smaller until they were just a thin white line against the blue sea, like fading illusions. The flight home passed in a blur. I didn't sleep, didn't watch movies, didn't even pretend to read the magazine tucked in the seat pocket. For 8 hours, I just sat there, replaying everything in my mind like I was looking for the moment I should have known better. When we touched down in Ohio, the late afternoon sun was casting long shadows across the terminal. I walked through customs in a daze, my carry-on feeling heavier than when I'd packed it. No souvenirs, no happy memories, just clothes and the weight of 3 days that had destroyed what should have been forever. Jasper was waiting in the arrivals area, leaning against a pillar with his phone in his hand. When he spotted me, his face broke into a relieved smile. "Fred? Man, I wasn't sure you'd be on this flight." He pulled me into a quick hug, then stepped back, his eyes searching my face. "You okay? Your message was pretty cryptic." "Let's talk in the car," I said. Jasper's truck smelled like coffee and sawdust, familiar and grounding. He tossed my bag in the back and slid into the driver's seat without pressing for details. That was Jasper, patient when it mattered. We were halfway to the highway when I finally spoke. She cheated, 3 days in. The words felt strange in my mouth, like I was telling someone else's story. Jasper's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "What? Haley?" I nodded and gave him the condensed version. The text, the bartender, the stairwell meeting. Jasper listened in complete silence, his expression shifting from shock to disbelief to something harder. "Jesus, Fred," he finally said. "What did you do?" "Left her there. Made sure the hotel documented everything. Took the first flight home." A slow, grim smile spread across Jasper's face. "Good. That's good." He glanced at me. Most guys would have lost their minds. Started screaming, maybe done something stupid. Wouldn't have fixed anything. "No, it wouldn't have." He nodded approvingly. "So what's next?" "I need to talk to a lawyer. Get this, whatever it is, undone." "Annulment," Jasper said. "My cousin went through something similar a few years back. His wife had been hiding a whole other relationship. Since it was so new, they could just erase it, legally speaking." We drove the rest of the way to my workshop in comfortable silence. I'd built the place myself, a converted warehouse with high ceilings and south-facing windows that flooded the space with natural light. My life's work lived in these walls. "You want me to stick around?" Jasper asked as we pulled up. I shook my head. "I need some time. But thanks for the ride. Call me if you need anything. I mean it. Middle of the night, whatever." Inside, I flicked on the lights and let the familiar smells wash over me. Wood stain, sawdust, metal and oil. I ran my hand along a half-finished cabinet, the cherry wood smooth under my fingers. Everything was exactly as I'd left it before the wedding. Tools organized, projects labeled, materials stacked by type and purpose. Order, structure, things that made sense. I spent an hour just reopening the shop, uncovering machinery, checking inventory, running my hands over the tools that had built my life. Each one was solid and real, with clear purpose, no deception, no hidden motives. The next morning, I met with Allison Park in her downtown office. She was younger than I'd expected, maybe late 30s, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense attitude that I immediately appreciated. "Let's see the certificate," she said after I'd explained the situation. I handed over the folder with our marriage license and certificate. She studied it carefully, then looked up with a decisive nod. "You're in luck, Mr. Huntington. Ohio law gives you two paths here. Since the marriage is under 30 days old and involves adultery, we can file for annulment instead of divorce. What's the difference? An annulment legally erases the marriage. It's as if it never happened. No division of assets, no spousal support to consider." She leaned forward. "But we'll need evidence. Solid evidence. I've got the text messages, hotel records. The manager documented everything." Allison nodded approvingly. "Good. Now I need you to gather every detail. Messages, receipts, hotel confirmations. If you have any photos that establish timeline, those too. And most importantly, stay calm. Don't engage if she reaches out." That night, back in my own house, still with empty spaces where Haley's things had been, I opened my laptop to find an email waiting. "Fred, I can't believe you just left me alone in a foreign country. Whatever you think you saw, you're completely overreacting. We need to talk. Call me." HE short, defensive. Not a single word of apology. I didn't respond. Instead, I created a new folder on my desktop labeled Truth. Into it went copies of Marco's text, my flight details, the hotel documentation Signora Valli had emailed, and screenshots of Haley's social media posts about our perfect honeymoon. The truth doesn't need explanation or defense. It just needs to be preserved. 2 days later, I was finishing up a custom drawer installation when the mail arrived. Among the usual business catalogs and utility bills was a crisp white envelope with a law firm's letterhead embossed in the corner. My stomach tightened as I sliced it open with my utility knife. The letter inside was typed on heavy cream paper, the kind that's meant to intimidate through quality alone. "For abandonment and financial malfeasance, Haley Huntington." I scanned down to find Preston Hale, attorney at law, informing me that I was being accused of willful abandonment of spouse in a foreign jurisdiction and financial control amounting to abuse. The letter detailed how I had, without notice or provision, left my wife stranded without adequate funds or return transportation, causing significant emotional distress and public humiliation. My hands were steady, but my throat burned. The final paragraph demanded immediate restoration of all joint accounts and compensation for emotional suffering, or they would pursue all available legal remedies. I remembered my father's old saying, when someone throws the first punch, they're usually the one who's scared. This letter reeked of fear disguised as strength. I called Allison immediately. "I just received a threat letter from Preston Hale. He's representing Haley." "Scan it to me," she said, "all business. Don't respond to anything until I review it." 20 minutes later, I was sitting in Allison's office, watching her read through the letter a second time. To my surprise, she smirked. "Empty leverage," she said, setting the letter down. "Preston Hale specializes in these intimidation letters. He's hoping you'll panic and offer a settlement. So this is nothing?" "It's not nothing, it's their opening move. But it's weak." She tapped the paper. "Notice how they're framing you as the villain? Classic deflection. They know she's the one who breached the marriage contract." Relief washed over me. "So we just ignore it?" "We don't ignore it. We respond by filing our annulment petition immediately, with all evidence attached. No counter threats, just facts." My phone rang just as I was leaving Allison's office. Unknown international number. "Mr. Huntington, this is Claire Dennison with the U.S. Consular Office in Naples." My relief vanished instantly. Your wife, Haley Huntington, has filed a report with local authorities that was escalated to our office. She initially reported as a missing person situation that has now been amended to include claims of financial abandonment. I pressed the phone tighter to my ear, trying to process what I was hearing. Sir? Are you there? Yes, I'm here. What exactly does that mean? It means we've had to open a case file. Mrs. Huntington is claiming you left her without access to funds or return transportation. While not criminal under Italian law, it does create a consular matter we're required to investigate. I explained as calmly as I could that I had documentation of Haley's infidelity, that she had access to her own credit cards, and that I had proof the hotel had assisted her. I understand, sir. However, we still need to follow protocol. We'll be sending you formal documentation of the complaint. You'll have an opportunity to respond. After hanging up, I immediately called Allison back and relayed the conversation. She's escalating, Allison said, her voice tight with concentration. This actually helps us. It shows desperation. Doesn't feel like it helps, I muttered. Trust me. We'll contact Signora Valli today for verified statements from the hotel staff and surveillance timestamps. The more Haley pushes these false claims, the more thoroughly we can refute them with evidence. That afternoon, Jasper came by the shop. He'd been checking in daily, bringing coffee, and the kind of silent support only old friends can offer. Got another situation, I told him, explaining both the letter and the embassy call. She's trying to rewrite history, he said, shaking his head. Classic move. Allison says we need to move fast on securing everything. Can you help me talk to the suppliers? Make sure they know the business is stable? Already started. Told Mike at the lumberyard yesterday that everything's normal, just some personal stuff. He gets it. His brother went through something similar. I nodded gratefully. Thanks, man. What else do we need to do? Change the locks, business and home. Not that she has keys yet, but I'll call my guy. He can do it tomorrow. That night, after everyone had left, I stayed in my workshop alone. The soft hum of machinery filled the space as I ran a final sanding on a table edge. The repetitive motion was meditative, allowing my mind to process the day's events. The wood grain revealed itself under my hands, honest and true to its nature. No pretense, no hidden agenda. She's not going to win this, I whispered to myself, the machinery masking my words. Not because I wanted revenge, but because the truth deserved to stand. 2 months after discovering my wife with another man on our honeymoon, I stood in an Ohio family courtroom, hands clasped before me. The room smelled of old paper and furniture polish, that distinct government building scent that always reminded me of jury duty and driver's license renewals. Now it would mark the end of my 3-day marriage. Allison Park stood beside me, her navy suit crisp and her posture confident. She'd prepared me for this moment, meticulously. Let the evidence speak, she'd told me during our last prep session. Your silence carries more power than any emotional outburst. Across the aisle, Haley sat with her shoulders slightly hunched, a far cry from the woman who'd posed for endless honeymoon photos against the Amalfi sunset. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and the designer outfit she'd chosen seemed to hang on her frame. She hadn't looked at me once since entering the courtroom. Preston Hale, all slick confidence in an expensive suit, leaned over to whisper something in her ear. She nodded mechanically. All rise, the bailiff announced as Judge Eleanor Whitman entered, her expression neutral and assessing as she took her seat. Be seated, she said, opening the file before her. Huntington versus Huntington, petition for annulment on grounds of fraud and adultery. We'll start with opening statements. Preston rose first, buttoning his jacket with practiced ease. Your Honor, this case isn't about infidelity. It's about abandonment and financial manipulation. My client, Haley Huntington, was left stranded in a foreign country without resources when the petitioner, Fred Huntington, abruptly departed their honeymoon after an argument. He canceled her return ticket, restricted her access to joint funds, and left her vulnerable thousands of miles from home. His voice rose dramatically. Mr. Huntington's claims of adultery are merely a smokescreen to justify his controlling behavior and avoid his marital obligations. I felt my jaw tighten but kept my expression neutral. The courtroom seemed to shrink around me as I listened to this twisted version of events. Remember how Mom used to say truth doesn't need makeup? Just let it stand barefaced in the light. Allison stood next, her movements economical and purposeful. Your Honor, this case is straightforward. Fred and Haley Huntington were married for exactly 3 days before Mr. Huntington discovered his new wife engaged in an affair with a hotel employee named Marco Rossi. We have definitive evidence of this infidelity, which constitutes both fraud and adultery under Ohio law, making this marriage eligible for annulment. She gestured toward me. Mr. Huntington did not abandon his wife. He removed himself from an untenable situation after ensuring she had access to proper channels for assistance, which she received within hours. Judge Whitman nodded. Let's see the evidence, counselors. I watched as Allison methodically presented our case. First, the text message screenshot. Can you slip away? M. Then the hotel's official statement detailing how Haley had attempted to charge services to my account after I'd left. Finally, she submitted the letter from Signora Valli, confirming that Marco Rossi had been dismissed from his position for violating hotel policy regarding guest relationships. And here, Allison continued, is documentation from the U.S. consulate showing Mrs. Huntington received immediate assistance upon request, contradicting claims of abandonment. Preston attempted to interrupt several times, but Judge Whitman silenced him with a raised hand. Mr. Hale, you'll have your opportunity to respond. Please continue, Ms. Park. Allison nodded. Finally, Your Honor, we have Mrs. Huntington's own signed statement from the hotel acknowledging her separate accommodations after Mr. Huntington's departure. Accommodations she willingly arranged rather than contacting the embassy immediately, as would be expected from someone truly stranded. When Preston's turn came, he tried to shift focus to my pattern of controlling behavior and disproportionate response to a misunderstanding. But I could see from Judge Whitman's expression that his arguments weren't landing. She kept returning to the evidence, particularly the time-stamped messages between Haley and Marco that predated our arrival at the hotel. After what seemed like hours but was probably only 40 minutes, Judge Whitman closed the folder. I've reviewed all submitted evidence and arguments, she said, her voice firm. The petition for annulment is granted on grounds of fraud and adultery. Each party returns to premarital status. No support, no shared property. I exhaled slowly, feeling years of tension release from my shoulders. Beside me, Allison gave a small nod of satisfaction. This matter is concluded, Judge Whitman said, rising. As we gathered our things to leave, Haley finally looked at me, her eyes red-rimmed and her voice barely above a whisper. You're just walking away? She asked. I met her gaze, steady and calm. I already did. Monday morning arrived with the smell of fresh sawdust and the steady rhythm of my hands against wood. 2 months had passed since the courthouse, and I found myself falling back into patterns. Wake up, coffee, workshop by 7. The familiarity anchored me in ways I hadn't expected. Order from the Millers just came in. Jasper called from the front office, waving a design sheet. Custom Entertainment Center, Cherrywood. They want it before Thanksgiving. I nodded, wiping my hands on a shop rag. Tell them we can do it. Add it to the schedule board. Jasper had been staying late most evenings, helping me organize new client paperwork and making calls I couldn't bring myself to handle yet. After the annulment made the local rounds, you know how small towns talk, business had actually picked up. Seemed like people appreciated watching someone stand their ground. You know, Jasper said, leaning against the doorframe. The Hendersons asked if you could build them matching nightstands too, willing to pay extra for the rush. Add it, I said. I'll stay late Thursday. He studied me for a moment. You don't have to take every job that comes in, Fred. I know, I replied, tracing grain lines with my thumb. But I want to. The truth was I needed the work, not for money but for the quiet it brought my mind. Each project gave me a problem with clear solutions, unlike the mess that had been my marriage. When I was sanding edges or measuring joints, I wasn't thinking about hotel corridors or text messages or courtroom faces. Have you ever noticed how healing often happens in the spaces between trying to heal? It comes in small moments, realizing you've gone a whole day without thinking about it, or laughing at something without feeling guilty afterward. Later that evening, I was finalizing specifications for the Miller job when my email chimed. The subject line read, Resolution, Positano Grand Hotel. My chest tightened as I clicked it open. Dear Mr. Huntington, as promised, I am writing to inform you that following our internal investigation, Marco Rossi's employment with Positano Grand Hotel has been terminated, effective immediately. Furthermore, his violation of our strict policy regarding staff-guest relations has been reported to relevant authorities, resulting in the revocation of his seasonal work permit. We deeply regret the unfortunate circumstances of your stay and remain committed to maintaining the highest standards of professionalism and discretion. If you have any further concerns, please do not hesitate to contact me directly. Sincerest regards, Signora Lucia Valli, General Manager, Positano Grand Hotel. I read it twice, feeling nothing like the satisfaction I'd expected. Just a hollow sort of finality. I clicked delete and closed my laptop. Another chapter sealed shut. Jasper called the next morning as I was opening the shop. You see Haley's Instagram? He asked without greeting. You know I don't follow that stuff, I answered, flipping on the lights. She's posting all these quotes about personal growth and learning from mistakes. Bunch of sunset pictures with captions about new beginnings. Damage Control 101. He paused. She moved back in with her parents last week. Carol at the bank told me. That's not our business anymore, I said firmly. Just thought you'd want to know. I don't. But I did. In some small way. Not because I cared about her circumstances, but because it confirmed what I already knew. Consequences eventually find everyone. The voicemail came 3 days later while I was delivering a set of chairs to a client across town. When I checked my phone, the number was familiar. Haley's parents' landline. Fred, this is Margaret, Haley's mother. I wanted to say how sorry we are about everything that happened. We raised her better than this. I hope you know that. Her voice trembled slightly. If you ever want to talk well, anyway, take care of yourself. I never called back. Some apologies come too late to matter, and some bridges aren't meant to be rebuilt. Instead, I channeled everything into my work, expanding the shop's capacity and accepting new types of projects I'd been too cautious to try before. On a quiet Friday evening, 6 months after the hearing, I locked up alone, running my hand over the bench where I'd planned to carve our initials on our 1-year anniversary, a tradition my father had started with my mother. The wood remained unmarked, waiting for a different story. I turned the light off above it, leaving the darkness to cover what never was. 6 months passed, then 8. Seasons changed and the world kept spinning, indifferent to my small corner of Ohio. The business was thriving. I'd hired 2 part-time apprentices and expanded the showroom. My days fell into a rhythm. Coffee at dawn, sawdust by noon, quiet evenings with blueprint papers spread across my kitchen table. It was a Tuesday in October when Jasper showed up unannounced, plastic bags of Chinese food dangling from his fingers. He kicked at my door with the toe of his boot. Food service, he called through the wood. Open up before the lo mein gets cold. I wiped my hands on a shop towel and let him in. The scent of garlic and soy sauce filled the entryway. You could have called first, I said, already reaching for plates. And miss the chance to catch you brooding? Never. He dropped the bags on the counter and started unpacking containers. Besides, Carol said she saw your truck here past 9 last night. You working yourself to death again? I shrugged, just finishing the Andersons built-ins. He studied me for a moment, head tilted. You know something. You look younger. What? Younger. Less, I don't know. Heavy. He gestured vaguely at me while stabbing a piece of chicken with a chopstick. Must be nice not having that wedding ring weighing down your hand anymore. I laughed softly, a real laugh that didn't hurt coming out. Yeah, I guess so. Speaking of which, what did you ever do with it? The ring, I mean. I gestured for him to follow me down the hallway to my bedroom. Opening the top drawer of my dresser, I pulled it open to reveal nothing but neatly folded socks. Empty, I said. Sold it 3 weeks ago. No shit? What did you get for it? Enough. I closed the drawer. Bought that Festool router system I've been eyeing forever and... I hesitated. And what? Jasper pressed. A plane ticket. Barcelona next month. 10 days. His face split into a wide grin. Look at you. International man of mystery. Hardly, I said, leading him back toward the kitchen. Just thought it was time to see something new, this time on my terms. We ate standing at the kitchen island, Jasper filling me in on local gossip, his new girlfriend, his sister's baby, the ridiculous price of copper pipe. Normal life stuff that once seemed so far away. After dinner, I showed him the kitchen remodel I'd just finished for myself. Hand-carved walnut cabinets with dovetail joints. Stone countertops I'd installed myself. Every angle perfect, every line clean. "This is museum-quality work, Fred," he said, running his fingers along the grain. "It's just nice to build something that stays together," I replied. When the kitchen grew quiet, Jasper leaned against the counter. "Heard anything about her lately?" I knew who he meant without asking. "Nothing directly. Allison mentioned something about retail work at the mall." "Yeah, that's what I heard too. Plus, she's still paying off those hotel charges. Apparently, Marco put a bunch of stuff on her card that last night." "What about him?" "Word is, Italian immigration sent him packing, revoked work permit." Jasper shrugged. "Karma's funny that way." I nodded, but said nothing. Their stories weren't mine anymore. Later, after Jasper left, I sat on the back porch with a beer, watching stars appear one by one. The night was cool but not cold, the kind of evening that makes you appreciate simple things. Clear skies, good friends, quiet moments. You know what they never tell you about betrayal? It doesn't have to define you. It can refine you instead. Like wood grain exposed after sanding away damaged layers, what remains is often stronger, more beautiful for having survived. The day my flight left for Barcelona, I stood at the gate watching planes taxi across the tarmac. My carry-on held a sketchbook for design ideas, a good book, and nothing else that weighed me down. As passengers began boarding, I took one last look at my phone. No messages, no loose ends. Just the clean slate I'd worked so hard to create. I boarded the plane and found my window seat, eyes steady on the horizon as we climbed above the clouds. The words came to me then, quiet but certain. When someone shows you who they are, you don't fix them. You fix your life without them. I believe stories such as this find us for a reason. If this one touches you, please subscribe. I share a new one every day. In the meantime, there are 2 stories on the screen that are even better.